Hey everyone, Big Dom here, and this is my tutorial on GSA Search Engine Ranker. And this is basically a tutorial to kind of get you on the fast track to get started with this scenario. And we'll cover the GSA Capture Breaker, connecting with the GSA SEO Indexer, as well as the GSA URL Redirect Pro. So using these softwares is a basic starter package. We'll talk about some third-party APIs, and we'll break this video into two parts because there's a lot to cover, but my approach is to get you started with a good basic understanding of the mechanics, and we'll go through a setup with a third-party provider for search engine ranker lists and get the whole show going and give you a working example. So, that being said, let's get started. Okay, this is GSA Search Engine Ranker, and this is what it's going to look like the first time you start it up and you're fully licensed. Now, like all posting softwares, you have certain general settings that you have to set, and in this case, that is under options. So before we create a campaign, let's review the options. And under our options, we have submissions, captures, indexing, filters, and advanced. And we'll talk about all of this. So, it's important to understand that when you create a campaign, inside the actual campaign configurations, depending on how you are posting, whether you are using a list or scraping your own lists, require different settings. So while these settings will apply to all of your campaigns, depending on the type of campaign you're running and what resources you're using, you may have to alter settings in these options for that particular campaign. So these settings are not a one-size-fits-all for all of your campaigns. That's important to understand. Now, depending on your computer and the resources you have, you're going to want to control your threads. I generally keep mine at around 100. And I might set this to decrease if my resources on the CPU get over 80%. But generally, I leave my memory usage alone because I have enough memory on all my systems. My systems that run these softwares have a minimum of 32 gigabytes of RAM. Okay, now the next thing we'll want to do here is we need to configure proxies. So what we're going to do is we're going to select search engines, we're going to want public, and we're going to go to configure. And this is the common interface of GSA's built-in proxy scraper. You'll find it in most of their applications. And go under your options. We're going to select search. I like to set this at like 30 minutes and give it a nice number. Usually I put it at 500. You could do 1,000. The higher the number, the more active it's going to continue to search. You want to select automatically disable proxies if detected as being down. Okay, and the rest you can leave it just as it is. Okay, you don't have to overly run the threads on this, but of course you can increase it. Sometimes I run these at 50 or 100. It depends on the needs of my campaign. But to start out, these are good, nice general settings to review. Okay. Now, on the matter of using private proxies, you're going to want to check this. And when you configure this, you can add your proxies here. You can put them into a text file and just import them. Usually it's host, port, login, and password is the most common format. I use Storm proxies, and I use them for a variety of purposes. Sometimes I will add them in here. Using a minimum amount of 10 paid proxies will run you about $20 a month, depending on the provider. At least with me, with Storm proxies, it's about $20 per 10. And These can be useful with your campaigns. They're definitely going to help your success rates. However, you're going to be running slow. So, when you're running slow, the proxies that you can scrape freely are going to really be more than adequate. However, if you feel you want to use them, this is how you'll add them in. You can also add a single proxy in at a time. I'm not going to cover that in this video. It's pretty basic. When you go to a provider, they give you your proxy formatted, like mine come like this. Gives the IP, the port, the login, and the password, and you paste that in as one line of code. It's pretty basic. Okay. Now the next thing we want to talk about under options is CAPTCHA. And you'll see here by default it has checked manual input, and when this is running it will launch a small dialog box allowing you to manually input the CAPTCHAs. Of course, that's not what we want to do. What we want to do is we want to start by employing GSA's CAPTCHA breaker. Okay? And what we'll do here is go to the list, and you can see there's quite a bit of options selected. And in here, I usually set this to 2. I don't set any minimum, and just leave it go, just like that. Over here, run as a web server. Now when you start this up, generally if you're just running GSA CAPTCHA breaker, you'll want to run this as a web server. But if you're going to include other CAPTCHA softwares such as CAPTCHA Sniper or XEvil for CAPTCHA breaking, and that's made by Botmaster Labs, then you'll want to leave this off when you start it, and you'll want to start those applications up first and to start this one last. But when we're just using this one, we're going to want to run as a web server, and you'll see this please wait come up, and it'll take a little while. It'll take sometimes a few minutes before that goes, so let me pause the video. Okay, that took a few minutes, but once it's complete, you just click OK, and basically you are ready to go. Now there is one other thing I'd like to do personally. Now, this is an overview video to sort of get the basic startup going with GSA, using GSA Search Engine Ranker, the Caption Breaker, GSA SEO Indexer, and GSA URL Redirect Pro. I like to incorporate more than one CAPTCHA software into my system. So generally I'm using this with CAPTCHA Sniper and or XEvil. But in addition, what I do is I use 2CAPTCHA. And 2CAPTCHA is a CAPTCHA service that you can pay for with a third-party API. And when you go to their website, you will fill an account with a minimum of like $25, and that will go a very, very long way, especially when you have these other applications in the middle attempting to break the CAPTCHAs first. You simply paste your API key into here, and that's really all you need to do. You don't need to change any of these other settings. Of course, as you get more advanced, you may decide that you wish to get involved with some of these, but you can just leave them set to that and click OK, and you'll have 2CAPTCHA in the list for, you know, your third service. And of course, you're also going to go over here and do the same thing, is include that from here into this. So you actually don't have to have it here, okay? You want to actually set that over here, add the 2CAPTCHA, paste your API key in, and set it. So this way it goes as a follow-up off of this. I'm just going to remove that. And this way it passes from this. You can set the sequence of how these are going to be handled from one CAPTCHA service to another. So if it doesn't go here, it goes to 2CAPTCHA or CAPTCHA Sniper or XEvil. And you create a chain process, okay, in this sort of setup when you want to use more than one CAPTCHA breaker software and I like to back them up with a service at the end. Okay? Okay, that took a few minutes, but once it's complete, you just click OK, and basically you are ready to go. Now there is one other thing I'd like to do personally. Now, this is an overview video to sort of get the basic startup going with GSA, using GSA Search Engine Ranker, the Caption Breaker, GSA SEO Indexer, and GSA URL Redirect Pro. I like to incorporate more than one CAPTCHA software into my system. So generally I'm using this with CAPTCHA Sniper and or XEvil. But in addition, what I do is I use 2Captcha. And 2Captcha is a CAPTCHA service that you can pay for with a third-party API. And when you go to their website, you will fill an account with a minimum of like $25, and that will go a very, very long way, especially when you have these other applications in the middle attempting to break the CAPTCHAs first. You simply paste your API key into here, and that's really all you need to do. You don't need to change any of these other settings. Of course, as you get more advanced, you may decide that you wish to get involved with some of these, but you can just leave them set to that and click OK, and you'll have 2Captcha in the list for, you know, your third service. And of course, you're also going to go over here and do the same thing, is include that from here into this. So you actually don't have to have it here, okay? You want to actually set that over here, add the 2Captcha, paste your API key in, and set it. So this way it goes as a follow-up off of this. I'm just going to remove that. And this way it passes from this. You can set the sequence of how these are going to be handled from one CAPTCHA service to another. So if it doesn't go here, it goes to 2Captcha or CAPTCHA Sniper or XEvil. And you create a chain process, okay, in this sort of setup when you want to use more than one CAPTCHA Breaker software. And I like to back them up with a service at the end, okay? And that kind of covers that aspect of this. When you're first starting out, I recommend you just start out with the GSA CAPTCHA Breaker and back it up with an additional CAPTCHA service like 2Captcha or one of the many others that are out there. You could just Google it. Now, if you don't want to start out with the GSA SEO Indexer, they have a utility in here to ping your post to these sites, which is a nice feature. If you're going to use it, hit submit all types as well. Okay, this is useful to getting your sites pinged so they will get picked up by indexers, but it is not the most effective approach. Okay, what I do is I use GSA SEO Indexer. I also will use the GSA URL Redirect program. However, I don't always use it with GSA Search Engine Ranker. I run these two programs alone frequently with different scenarios. That's really another video that I'm covering in my course that I'm creating. But in this aspect, I want to show you how to connect them. Because in this case, what we want to do is we would activate them by checking these boxes. And likewise, we have to do the same over here. So we're already checked for the GSA Indexer Redirect Pro, and we would go here and configure indexers and check here, and that's all that's required to sync these up. Now, of course, with this, you have to supply keywords, and for every keyword that you supply, you're going to get one additional indexing for that. So if you use these both along with GSA, keep your keyword phrases small, 3 to 6 phrases, no more. Okay, Now with the indexer, both of these apps need to be configured, and likewise, like you're going to want to configure proxies, and you'll see here it's exactly the same as configuring proxies that I outlined in the beginning of the video with GSA. And likewise, same thing here. You're going to want to configure your proxies, same exact system that's contained in GSA Search Engine Ranker. Another thing you'll want to do here is you also, after you configure the proxies, you have to check that you're going to use proxies, okay? And same thing here. You have to, it doesn't have a check, but it says on or off, so you want to make sure that you have that selected to on, so that both of these programs will be scraping their own proxies in the background. Now, another thing that you can do, even if you just get 10 proxies from a company like Storm Proxies, is you don't need all of them. You could take a few paid proxies and add them into both of these if you want. Something you can experiment a little bit with as you go along, but not required, especially with these. In truth, I never put paid proxies into these. Just throwing that out there so you learn the process of, how to utilize these things. Once you've got that, you're basically set. Your only other thing here is your number of threads. You can do more than 10 threads here. Now, when you're running this with GSA, you don't want to go crazy. I would do about 50 threads here. Or actually, I would do 100 threads here. Okay? And here, where you have number of threads, I use 100. Okay? The other thing that you want to do here is full indexer mode and check use only sites that can index deep links, because you're going to be making a lot of PR1 value sites that you're going to be posting to. So you want to kind of make sure that those get indexed and get included into the process. But you can experiment with this. A lot of times, many times for certain things I'm doing, I don't use full indexer mode. Full indexer mode currently is like 10,000 indexing services that it's going to post to. Quick indexer mode will get you roughly just under 500, and you can set the amount. You can also set to which sites that you want that index by PR level, and set the PR level so that it's greater than or equal to a certain number. Those are things you want to tinker with later. Generally, I leave them to 0 for these types of processes and just adjust my metrics. Okay? If I just want to touch on those briefly, there's a lot more really to know about those, and that's a kind of a deep topic of indexing. This video, we just want to cover the basic startup setup to get you going. Okay, let's look at our filter. And what they do is they provide you a list. They're all checked. Just check that. Skip submissions if the URL/domain is appearing in one of the following blacklists. Attention, this can slow down submission process a bit. That's okay. This is going to keep you off of those sites that are going to take your posts and fill it with malware and pop-ups and all sorts of other things. You don't want to be associated with that. Now let's take a look at the advanced option. Now this is where we get into a little bit of complexity, and I'm going to talk about third-party lists, because in this scenario, I'm going to take us through one setup using a third-party GSA SER list. So let's start with now what we want to do here is we want to keep these checked. And generally, you can start with these default locations, but I set my own, okay? And in this process, ultimately, for now, what you wouldn't know is that your final verified list is going to be your money list. You're going to be able to reuse that list in other campaigns. Those are the list of links that you successfully submit and ultimately get posted and verified. Now, depending on if you're using a third-party list, they may have you configure these differently. I do them on my local drive, but for some setups with third-party lists, you're going to use Dropbox. And let me just show you a quick example here. This is GSA SER list, and I recently signed on to them to see how their list is. And I don't believe you can really see this information until you're actually joined in the members area, but they give you a quick how to set up your Dropbox, which is pretty simple. You don't need a paid version. They will send you a link with your Gmail or whatever your email you use to set up your Dropbox. So that's important if you don't have Dropbox. And then you'll get an email from them, and you'll just click a link and you'll be able to get through the setup process pretty quickly. And then what they'll do is they will give you their instructions on how to configure for them. And they give you a lot of good, just some extra basic things about configuring proxies and other things, etc., etc. So I just want you to see that, not all setups are created equal. So depending on your campaign, you may be changing them. But for your first time, you don't need to do anything unless you're using a third-party list. Sometimes they will have you enable custom list. So those are things to understand. Another approach is, this is another company, SER Engines. And basically what they do is provide Web 2.0 blogs. And they give me an API key, which I take out of here, and I'm able to paste in here and then select update and say check for updates. Sorry, your API key is being used by another application. Okay, so let me go back here, get a new one. Paste the new one in, hit update, check for updates. Ba-boom, and there it is, and we got a nice list. Now what this particular one will do is, when we go to create a new campaign, we now have an additional resource up here at top that we can check. And this is from the API that's feeding in a list of additional resources. So you see, that's one way that these sometimes can work, are different than other sites. This one's very simple and easy to implement. However, do not use this with another system or list. Keep them separate and follow the guidelines that they provide. Now, the actual project dialog box is where all the real action and settings happen. So, what we're going to do is we're going to start by entering our URL in here. And you can have more than one URL. Now, even though in this example I'm putting in a root URL, which is just fictitious, we don't want to ever put the root URL into a website. You always want to be pointing to other pages on the site. Whatever it is that you're promoting, whether it's something e-commerce or blog articles, actual content pages, whatever it is, you do not use your main URL ever. Okay? Just keep that as a rule. And this is going to become the name of our project, in fact, and will appear on the left-hand side under projects when we're complete setting it up. Okay? Now, how we set this up, a lot of the main stuff is going to happen here under options. So let's just first take a look at the options here. And let us assume that what we're going to do is we're going to scrape our own URLs for posting. In which case, if we're going to do that, then what we can do under options is we're okay just using these basic settings to start to let them go into their root directories. Or you can choose to create, what I do is on my C drive, I create a directory, GSA lists, and give it a name as it may relate to certain projects. And then inside there, I create an identified folder, a submitted, a verified, and a failed, and I will map each one to that. So just so you sort of understand the dynamic between that and when you make a new project. So let's do this again. And I want to take a look at the options first, because what you're going to see here is there's a lot going on here. And a lot of this is where you're going to can either both get yourself into trouble and keep yourself out of trouble. So before we get into that, let's look at the data tab. Now, the first URL that you enter into here is going to become the project name, as I said earlier. But you can add additional URLs, and these can be social media URLs. I frequently do campaigns that the URL is simply a list of YouTube video links. In addition to this, when you add additional URLs, and even to the current URL, you can wrap it in anchor text, and you can put whatever you want in there so that when it links, it's going to wrap it with my anchor text. Okay? Now, that being said, this is an option we're going to leave unchecked for the moment. Use verified URLs from another project. Okay? Because you can use the verified URLs that you saved in the option for other projects. And now, what the main thing to understand here before we start taking a look at things like keywords is that right now we are only seeing data fields for blog comments, because if I remove that, no more blog contents. See? And as we uncheck these options, we lose our data fields. It becomes very minimal. Okay? And so for each one of these things that we're going to employ, and we're going to use articles, blog comment, document sharing, if you have PDFs that you're going to want to post, there's some strategies with that. Exploit is not a big one, but it's okay. Forum, guest book, image content, comment, indexer, microblog, pingback, RSS, social bookmark, social network, trackback, URL shortener, video if you have YouTube videos you want to add, and wiki. And of course, they have their own Web 2.0 list in here as well. So you're going to really want the nice run of things that you can post to. But as you can see, each one of these requires that you fill in these fields, okay, as prescribed, as you see. And you cannot bypass the system and not enter fields, because if we try to save our project, it will take us one at a time. Please define some articles first. Now, it's taking us into the article manager. Now, the reason it did that is GSA would like us to have our articles in here before we start configuring our data tab. But that's not necessary. But one of the reasons why is because in many of these fields that you will have to fill out, you'll notice that if I right-click in the field, there's a lot of additional options here, as you can see. And this one in particular, insert macro. This allows you to pull information out of other fields inside the system that you're configuring. So, for example here, you might take random lines and columns from a text file, or inserts random article related to your project's keyword anchor. Understand? But it can't do that if you don't have some articles in there. But it's not required to finish filling this out. And there's a lot of cool stuff in here to play with. You can insert your videos just by inserting that macro, and of course, obviously you can do more than one. Now, one thing I suggest is that you take the time to fill these out with quality information. Now, you can configure your own spinner with this. Like, for example, I have Spin Rewriter, but I don't have it configured with this system. And or you could, what I would suggest is that you use an external source to spin that, to generate the spin text. There's some free resources online. You don't need that much for a description. It's not necessary to spin the descriptions either all the time. But as you look down here at some of these things, they give you a lot of pre-made responses of Spintax. Okay, and those are really worth taking a look at because they really can be perfected, like for guestbook comments and blog comments, especially when you want to taper them to your particular campaign. And let me just give you a hypothetical, but you're promoting pet products, let's say, and you're promoting a range of, you should have a range of URLs that you're using as your money links. Then what you would do is you're going to have your articles in your article manager, and they're all going to be about that subject matter. But they're all different types of platforms here. You're going to have articles, but you're going to have, these are going to be searching like on when you're on forums to give responses about things like, so there's some advanced things that you could do with this. Now, your first time runs, you don't have to touch any of this. I'm just talking about it so you gain an understanding of how powerful this is and how you really could do some super advanced things when you get past learning the basics of just using this for your main purposes. A lot of this stuff is just going to be fine just the way it is. There's a couple of mandatory things here that if you're using, like they want German, just go to Google and take your description and run it through the translator for it. But make sure you fill all these out, and you can, like I said, experiment a little bit with some things you might want to inject in here, because you can do some, you can also format things the way you're going to want them to appear. This is like really critical to take your time to put together the quality of what you want to put in here. And up at the top here with your category, this is basically, you just sort of define basic categories. See this? So you can go to suggested and pick out all the types of categories. This will help you for certain types of postings where these are the standard model for categories, and you want to select those and get that in. Because remember, all of these different data fields are all meant for different resources that we have checked here. As you uncheck them, any ones you're not posting to, that will basically disappear from this interface. So taking the time to fill out those fields is critical. Now, let's take a look at a little bit at the top of it. Here is keywords, and you want to do a lot of keywords in here. And I suggest, if you're familiar with any keyword scraping tools or doing a little keyword research, or you should at the very least know the keywords and phrases you want to promote and fill it up in here and get a lot of them in there. You can also select to collect keywords from targets' websites. Use collected keywords to find new target sites. Now, keep something in mind. These are not going to work for every type of posting. It depends on, things where there's a lot of category-rich genres that you may be promoting, say, affiliate products for. Yes, you're going to be looking for possibly more keywords. Put keywords in quotes in search queries. These are things that you can kind of tinker around with. I don't always, take every option with these sorts of things. But here is where we're going to start getting into, went too far, adding what we want to do. Use keywords as anchor text, and that's what we would like to also do. So another thing is, when I put my keywords in, make everything, not all caps, but all capital, first letter of each word capital. Makes the anchor text better. So use keywords as anchor text, and then we want to you can go with just the settings, and then like branding. Let's say you're Jet Pet Products. You want your brand in there sometimes, but the rest you want really the keywords, and you can mess around with this a little bit and kind of go see how far you want to push it. But you don't need to really sort of overload it. I would expect that your documents, when we talk about articles, are going to be sort of content rich towards the phrases that you're trying to use this product for. Now, everything else you see here is just basically how I do my settings checked off. Collect keywords from target site, use collected keywords, and that's as far as I go with that. Like I said, have a nice thorough list and use random URL because, of course, a lot of times I've got 6 to 12 URLs in a campaign, and those become the links that are going to be embedded inside your articles. Okay, so for this video, I'm going to end it here on this data section, and that we're going to get into on part 2, covering some things with the article manager and the email verification, and then getting yourself started up. Now, everything else you see here is just basically how I do my settings checked off. Collect keywords from target site, use collected keywords, and that's as far as I go with that. Like I said, have a nice thorough list and use random URL because, of course, a lot of times I've got 6 to 12 URLs in a campaign, and those become the links that are going to be embedded inside your articles. Okay, so for this video, I'm going to end it here on this data section, and that we're going to get into on part 2, covering some things with the article manager and the email verification, and then getting yourself started up. Guys, if you like these videos, please give it a like. Don't forget to subscribe. And any questions or comments, leave in the comments below, and I'll try to follow up on that in the next video. Thanks, and have a great day, everyone.